sorry there was no Power Apps in the title here, but we're going to talk about Power Apps, and I'm going to try and do some demos here live. Well, you got to encourage me along the way. You feeling up to it on a Thursday of a conference early morning? Great. All right, so the keywords here are governable and modern, and the third would be Copilot, right? So we're going to cover those three topics in here, right? And so my team, I'm in the Power Application Platform group. Ryan Cunningham, hopefully some of y'all know him. He is my boss's boss, right? And so we own Power Pages, we own Power Apps, right, Studio. And we're also the platform that Dataverse runs on top of, right? I'm not Dataverse, but Dynamics 365. So the user experiences, not the Dataverse side, right? So I am a group engineering manager, which just means I manage managers and I have architects who work for me as well. So I'm not a product manager like a lot of the folks here presenting are. So I'm an engineer. I write code. My team writes code. We maintain the fundamentals and keep the site services up 360, right? So I'm not as polished as presenter as some of these PMs might be. So I just want to give you a little insight of where my team is in case you have some very specific questions or input for me. My team is kind of on the periphery, supporting some of the other teams like the studio team and the governance team and things like that. But we focus on your journey of adopting the platform, right? So our team owns enterprise application templates. Hopefully some of you have seen those. My team owns the SAP ERP and the SAP, the newly public previewed, the SAP OData connector. So if you have SAP in your organization, my team invests in the surround strategy for Power for that. And we also own migrations. So you'll be hearing a lot more about that over the next year or so as we invest more in migrating from, say, your legacy workloads. Right now, we're looking at, first generation low-code tools like Lotus Notes, Excel, Access, InfoPath, right? A lot of you have those here as well. So a lot of the things that I'm talking about here are not owned by my team, so I can take the feedback back to the team or questions back if I can't answer them. So here's the three items that we're going to cover today. Not necessarily in order of the last two. I'm going to mix them together a little bit and come back with some slides, which will be shared to you at the end of the conference. But we'll sort of set the stage. We'll do a long demo, and then we'll kind of cover some concepts back again that we talked about in the demo itself. So let's set the stage. So a lot of you in here are already familiar with our platform. It sounds like kind of going across from one side to the other. Power BI does the analytics side, and it's a low-code, no-code tool, just like all these are. Power Apps is building apps that run in your infrastructure for your internal users, right? Or users that you share your tenant in your tenant. Power Automate are the automations that are done. Power Pages are public websites or even internal websites. Those of you who have Power Apps licenses, you can actually use Power Pages. They're licensed for Power Pages as well. So you can use Power Pages internally for your users. So if you wanted to do a website, do liquid templates, and usually it's more of a pro code story for that. But then there's additional licensing cost for external, right? And then we have Copilot Studio, which is a graduate of the Power Virtual Agents space, and that is our custom Copilot editor for all of Microsoft now. It's graduated to cover the entire Microsoft ecosystem. And on top of that, we're weaving Copilot into the story for each of these products. And we've been very, very heavily invested in this over the last year. And in a lot of our products, we've been doing it for about 3 years now, incorporating AI of some sort into the platform. So in the Power App side, we're going to show the maker experiences. We're going to show end user experiences as well as administrative experiences that are driven by Copilot, right? And a lot of you might be thinking Copilot, is just this conversational sidecar, right? Or a control at the top or something like that. We've spent a lot of time on inline experiences of making, these micro value adds in your world. So for Power Apps, here's the benefits of it. A lot of organizations we see are empowering their departments to build applications using Power Apps as opposed to doing Excel or Access or one of the other low-code first-generation tools. But we also see a lot of organizations building on top of the platform as their enterprise application platform as well. And we are large scale. We are enterprise ready. Dynamics is running on top of us as well. So we have a lot of AI capabilities that are built out of the box, including our Copilot, some of the Copilot capabilities that I'll show you today. AI Builder, which you may have seen around things like form recognition, so reading an invoice, pulling fields out, leveraging that in your automate cloud flows or in your apps. The Copilot Studio for custom Copilots. Multi-device, like we're now native rendering on iOS and Android. We're on a journey still, but we cover a lot of the controls natively now as opposed to using WebView, which is what we're using in the past. We found memory issues and you just didn't have the great experience you have with native controls in iOS and Android. So we're invested heavily in this space, so that's fairly new. Offline support if you're using Dataverse as well. So that's out of the box. You just make sure it's turned on, and you're able to leverage that in Canvas or model-driven apps. We're gonna go through a lot of security and governance, advanced security and governance features built into the premium offerings. Does anyone leverage managed environments today? Okay, that is like our advanced governance and security umbrella, if you will. You basically turn it on and it gives you a lot of capabilities. So we're gonna talk through some of that today. And a key thing, I don't have any slides here, but if you listen to one of my peers, Nirav Shah, who owns the Dataverse platform, we are enterprise scale. He'll tell you how many exabytes of data that we have, how many transactions that we have through the platform, through the connector ecosystem in Dataverse. But we are running, we have a number of apps that customers are running that have 10,000 MAU, which means that 10,000 users have used it in a 28-day period, right? So that's quite large. And there's a huge ecosystem of extensibility that we have as well. So specifically on Copilot, here's just some numbers that Ryan Cunningham will present on around the impact that we see with what we've released thus far. And we're on a journey. The journey has started. We're continuing on and improving as we go. So the key as you watch these features for Copilot, this is just really still kind of early stages in some of them. They'll get better and they'll improve along the way. NPS is like the satisfaction of our makers. So you see that bottom 13 points. So that's quite a substantial increase. So when I say enterprise grade, you've probably seen some of this around the Copilot for M365 and the other products in the M365 suite is we really put a lot of emphasis around security, governance, and a lot of this you've heard is, we don't train our models on your customer data, right? So there's a link there at the bottom if you want access to that to get a little bit more information. Some of you taking pictures, and I have another link on this screen as well with an AKA a little shorter that goes around our security details around Power Platform and Copilot as well. So these are just some snippets of areas that you have control over, turning things on and off, having the ability to, if you have tenants outside of the areas that support Copilot today, you can do cross-tenant data sharing by option, to get a taste of the features for your tenants that aren't in the US, UK, or Australia. And I might be missing one or two that we've added recently. I've been telling some other speakers that I'm gonna do live demos and like, you're doing live demos on on conference internet? Good luck. So how many of you have built a Power App before? How many of you use the Copilot features that we have? Okay. All right, so I'm gonna go to make.preview, which is our preview version, because we've got a couple of things that have just rolled out. And while that's loading, I want to call out our blog that has a lot of things released now, and we're just constantly doing things. You'll see a lot of governance things here that are out there. So if you use customer managed keys, that's now in general availability. So our ALM story, advanced ALM, is now GA'd for the newer features that we have. And then we also have virtual network, Azure Virtual Network support that is in GA as well, right? So just want to call out, pay attention to this blog, subscribe to it. We have a lot of features coming out around advanced governance, advanced security, and Copilot. You'll see that as a common theme for us. So notice anything different for some of you? Like immediately we pop up with this dialogue that's welcoming me as a maker. Has anybody seen this before? Yeah, okay. So this is part of managed environments feature, and I'll show you that in a little bit how to turn it on, but I just wanted to mention that that was a little bit different. This is customizable. You can create your own content here for guiding your makers as a first time in an environment, right? So say you have a dev environment for them, or you have an environment for a department, you can introduce them to your standards, to your learning material through this entry point that we have here. You'll also notice I'm using it, I call it a dev environment, but it is of type dev developer, so we can talk a little bit more about that. But the first thing I'm going to do is start with natural language to application. And so I also want to call it here from a licensing perspective, there's no costs here for you to build things and use Copilot as you're building. So you don't need a Copilot for M365 license or a premium license or anything like that. These are features that we provide to you to help build applications. Now, when you start using Copilot as an end user, I'm a user of an app, that's when you require the premium licensing model. And we're still working on announcing what else you might need beyond that. But we're providing these features if you have a premium license for the next 2.5 months at no cost additional to the premium license. Right? You can talk more about that later. I'll be at the booth most of the rest of the day if you have questions on that. So these features that I'm showing you, you can use, this one is going to generate Dataverse tables. So that does require, to use them, you'll need a premium license. But some of the other inline features that I'll show you aren't going to require a premium license. All right, so I'm going to start out by doing natural language, and we're traveling to a conference, so I'm just going to ask it to give me like a travel budget request. Track that, something pretty basic. But I'm going to say I'm going to get a little more specific because it needs a little direction in some cases of new in process and completed. Something like that. So what we're doing behind the scenes is leveraging the large language models that we have. We have a lot of logic as well to understand and digest that and what that might mean in Dataverse tables, columns, fields, things like that. Right. And you'll notice that if I just look at status, I gave it a few options. It made it an option set. So it's kind of smart. It's not just going to be free text. I had to direct it because sometimes it'll work and sometimes it won't. So I gave it a little bit more qualifiers to be specific about it, right? And so we can now ask it, and a lot of you may have seen this demo, but we can ask it for, hey, what other columns, what other fields do you recommend? And it'll come back with a list of things that it gets from ChatGPT, right? And so we can take a look at department, manager, description. I'm going to add description, and then I'm going to add a few more columns. So let's do something like, what did it add? So a status, we have an amount, that's a currency that can be localized as well. So it's type currency. We have a description. I want a justification, right? So what's the justification? Justification, and I'll just call it conference name. And I think that's probably, was there a date? So it'll do that. And also notice it does sample data. And so I'm going to try and add some more columns, some more rows here as well, because it can take time to generate sample data. So I'll add some sample data. So it added my columns. The date is a date field. Justification is a single line of text. All right, so add 20 more rows of data. Fingers crossed. How many of you have seen this before? There's also some demos that we have around Excel, so you can take an Excel file that you have, and it'll walk you through bringing that into the platform as well as an app. All right, so it added some more demo data for me as well as I build my application. Right? So I'm going to go ahead and create the app, and this will take a little while, but behind the scenes, what happens? Yeah, you had a question?
After the table's been made, can you use Copilot to generate fake data for an existing table?
So the question was, after you've done this and you're creating the app, can you add more data? I haven't found a way to do that yet, but I know that's coming. If not, we have some advanced capabilities that are coming and build around the table experience, right? So you'll be able to do that. There may be a way, but I haven't found it beyond that.
From a compliance and governance standpoint, sometimes people need to build API related solutions. We don't want real data in there, so we got an easy way for the users to generate fake.
Yeah, I believe that there's a way to do it from other areas of Dataverse, right? But I'll investigate that as well. And if you want, just hit me up with my name on Hoover, ask that question, and I'll try and come back with the response. So what it's doing behind the scenes is generating a single table. Like I said, we stay tuned for build on that one. And it's generating a modern app using our modern controls, which are Fluent. Fluent is a UI framework and design patterns that Microsoft introduced that's leveraged throughout Office. So the M365 suite, the web versions, we're incorporating that as well into Power Platform to be consistent across the Microsoft ecosystem. They're naturally accessible and as well as themable. So there's a consistent way to do it. So we're moving more and more in that direction. There's still some controls that aren't Fluent yet, but or we call modern controls, but they're on the way. Yeah. Yeah, his question was, so we no longer have to install the creator kit, which is from my peers in PowerCat. They started this effort actually for us, and they do that a lot. Like the SUI starter kit was sort of the grandmother of the managed environments, for example. Same thing here. A lot of the controls that they built in the creator kit were folded into modern controls. They became modern controls. We leveraged the same code base actually. So they co-developed with us. They're in engineering as well, but they're just more of a customer facing, like Fast Track if you're using Fast Track in Azure, or I think Office has a team as well. So you don't necessarily have to. There are some additional controls that we haven't folded in yet that you might want to leverage that we don't have quite yet. So you still might need to use it. And there's still like the gallery control. We have a table that's Fluent, but not a gallery control. So like we're still trying to figure out what that guidance is from that team that owns this. I think it's more to use the tables, but there's not, and I'm also kind of pushing them to create a converter for us. So if you have an app not using modern controls, give me something to upgrade to a modern app. So stay tuned. Give me some evidence. Feel free to send me feedback on Hoover to say, push on that, please. We have 1,000 apps that need modern controls. Okay, so and your question was earlier around, hey, can we use Copilot to then add more data later? Well, the answer might not be yes right now, but you can use Copilot to add new screens, to adjust this, so you can have that continued conversation with your Copilot to help in that building journey. And I want to call, and you see it here right on the right? It takes a lot of real estate. So I'm going to close it here in a second, but you'll see it also is interacting with our Learn documentation. So if you go out to Learn or go out to the communities, the forums are hooked in here as well. So you could say, like, what is a gallery control? And it's going to go out to the help and pull that in for you. I did notice there's no links there, so I'll give that feedback to the team. I guess it didn't go.
Is Copilot, it defaults to going to the Canvas app. Is that coming to basically like readjust layouts for model-driven apps? So like you may have a data set, I want to do model-driven app rather than a Canvas app. Say, hey, let's organize your fields in your form to look like this, and still use that model-driven app interface instead of Canvas app.
So his question was around. I would try and summarize it, but essentially you want the best of both worlds. You want the designer of the model-driven app in a Canvas app space. And for those of you that don't know what the difference is between a model-driven app and a Canvas app, essentially model-driven app is it starts from your data, like Access. You create your data and the forms are generated essentially on top. You can customize them a little bit, but it's got a framework that it sort of follows, right? And it's a quick way to create data entry and data-driven applications. And Canvas, as you start, it's like PowerPoint. You're starting from either a template or from just a blank canvas. That's how it kind of came up. And it's very much pixel perfect, where you drop controls into that world. And before we were on this AI journey, we were spending a lot of time on our converged app journey, which you might have seen Canvas Pages. So that's come out of that. We'll be continuing to invest in that, but we'll see that pick up more here soon after we get through sort of the first couple of waves of Copilot and AI experiences. But you get the modern studio supports both, right? But to answer your question specifically, I don't think it's where you want it to be yet. But as we get back on and move on that convergence journey, you'll see more and more of the convergence of the two. And we're doing that today, like the controls. The controls are the same controls for model-driven app or Canvas apps. They're the same under the covers. And PCF, the component framework is leverageable in there. And we're rolling this out to Power Pages as well. So it supports all of those application canvases. So not exactly where you're wanting it, but we'll get more and more in that direction over time. But Pages are supposed to be kind of that hybrid mix where you can have you have a model-driven app with Canvas, many MINI Canvas apps as pages in them. Okay, so we get back from the help, a little bit of details on that. And so it generates an app, which is what we would call like in a modern experience with the modern controls. This is 100% modern control driven off of this one. And if we go play it, we'll see the app is running. And then I did want to show this. I don't know if folks have seen this, but you can test it out on different, it is adaptable, right? So you'll see it adjust to screen sizes based on what you... This is a Canvas app, yeah. This generates Canvas app. It generates a Dataverse table. So you can see in the data, you can see it generates a Dataverse table for us, travel expense requests, and then it generates a model-driven app on top. We actually see a lot more Canvas apps. What's that? No, sorry, it generated a Dataverse table and it generated a Canvas app. Sorry. Yeah, correct. We do see a lot more customers lean towards the Canvas app experience where they can control how it looks a lot more easily. Right. So back in the preview mode, you can see it is adaptive, and I wanted to show, it'll adapt based on the screen resolution and all. And I did mention earlier, for iOS and Android, it's going to generate the controls as native controls, not as, web view controls. That's a recent investment that we did, right? Okay, so where else can Copilot be used? So I can come back in Copilot and I can tell it to add, I'll just say like add a screen for collecting feedback through email. Whether or not I probably worded it differently than I have in the past, but basically it'll create a new screen that has an email layout for me. I can tell it to modify the app itself and do that. Again, we're still advancing this, and more advancements are going to be coming out over time. So it gives us a feedback form, which is an email form. You need to wire it up for what it's going to do. All right. So some of the features that we've announced recently, and I'll show you, if you look in here, you can see we have those containers that'll adapt. That's what's driving that for us. It used to be hard to kind of find them, but we've made it easier through the generation that we've been doing. So if we select an item here, we close Copilot, give us a little more room, and expand this out, we can see I've got a formula here. So if I'm just starting and I don't really know what all this means, we have a feature now. You see the inline Copilot here. So I'm going to click that, and I'm going to say explain this formula. So we recently announced this. This is why I needed to be in the preview.make And you can do that as well, right? We have some preview features. That's just a first, like the way we roll out changes is we roll them in what we call safe deployment. So we'll roll it across the world in stations. So different geographies with different sizes will be in different stations. So the US is like station 6. The Europe is station 5. So they're the later stations. This is station 1. So it's like we go into our PPE environment, which is like internal Microsoft and things like that. And then we'll go to station 1, right? So, and this is just the maker experiences, right? When you do this. All right, so if I do explain this formula, you'll see it'll kind of give you a summary. And I've seen some that are like a paragraph and a half long with the complex. You've seen the really long items, right?
And that, once you do that, can you tell it to add as a comment? So they can comment the code?
I would say stay tuned for that. That would be my response. But that's the kind of thinking that we're doing here is like what is complicated. And you mentioned comments. Comments is a fairly recent capability that we've added to where I can add a comment to different areas. The application itself, but different areas of the application, I can add comments and we can track that. And some of you might have seen the co-authoring experiences that we have here where you can kind of watch somebody, as they're editing in read-only mode while someone's editing. Stay tuned for that coming soon. More advanced features there. Okay, and I wanted to do, so we have a budget amount. So here's another feature. Actually, Explain This is, I think, rolled out to the US, but this feature is not. This is a generation feature that we have. So what I want to do is I want to go, the field that I want is color. So we see the color is static, right? So I want it to be dynamic. I want the name of the conference to be red if it's over, say, $10,000 budget, right? So I want some visual, which, some conditional thing. So usually I have to go and write out that Power Effects, but I'm gonna go ahead and type it as a comment, and we have a generation now that'll generate Power Effects for you based on your comment. So you describe it, basically it's describe it, and then it generates it. So let me see how this goes. So if the field is called amount is greater than, let's say, 1,000, let's do greater than or equal. And you do it as / or / star, and then it'll generate. You see generating, it's hard to see, but it actually generated a formula, but I'm not done yet. If amount is greater than 1,000, then make the conference name red, otherwise make it black. And then you just pause for a minute and you'll see it'll show generating, and then it'll generate. I probably just messed it up. Yeah, I'll have to retype. And so what you have to do is it'll tell you if you want it, accept it, hit tab. And so I've accepted it. And so it generated it for me. Okay, so let's kind of test this out. So I'm gonna run this. All right, so let's change the budget. We'll change the budget amount to, we have to edit it. It's a whole bunch. Please work. Oh, yeah, okay. So then we see red, and it's everywhere. Okay, so there's a bug actually right now in this. What it generated for us was not exactly correct. It generated current item. It should be this item. All right, so that should fix it. And we should see already the top one only is red, because that's the only one I changed. Before, they were all red, because current item means something different. Okay, cool. Yay? Okay, all right. Go team, Tasha, and everybody else working on this. Great job. All right. I can't take credit. Let's publish the app. So that's the next step to get it shared. So we're going to look at another Copilot feature that we have. There, it's publishing now. All right, so for this, we have the ability to generate the description. How many apps do you see out there that have no description? You're like, what does that even mean? And they've got a name of an app called App One or something like that. Well, we've created this generation capability. This is using a model, essentially, to look through all the apps, artifacts, and assets, understand it, and then provide you with a suggestion. So you can do it in one of two ways. That you can, actually in one of the governance features, you can turn on that it has to have an app description, and it'll generate it for you on publish, right? Or I'll just do it selectively here, generate using AI. It's a pretty simple app, so it's not going to be anything complicated. But it's might be a little wordy, a little verbose, so you can go in and edit it as well. So let me publish. Cool, great. All right, what are some other challenges that you might have for those of you that administer this? Yeah, before you get there, yeah.
For those of us that still have thousands of input platforms, is there going to be an avenue to upload like the
XSN, yeah.
XSN file into it and have it auto create a Power App replacement of that input platform?
So his question was, I have a lot of info platforms, an on-prem SharePoint, or maybe standalone. Can you give me something to migrate these things? And the answer is yes. My team actually owns this, and we have a partner who's got some tooling that we're working with to learn more about this space and the needs of customers. But our investment in product will be more heavily geared towards the premium capabilities and moving you to Dataverse. And a lot of the customers that we're talking to want to move from SharePoint on-prem with InfoPath to SharePoint Online data customized with Power Apps, right? So our focus is more of moving to Dataverse, creating a Power App on top of Dataverse in that case. We're considering it as well in those other cases, but I'm assuming that that's what you mean, SharePoint to SharePoint, InfoPath to SharePoint.
Yeah, just with the 2026 date.
Right.
And that's a real big competition for large organizations.
Yep.
So.
And Access is in the same position. Access last year announced an end of life, end of support as well. So we're looking at both of those. We have programs we're piloting now with large organizations that are signing new deals right now to learn a little bit more and working with partners on InfoPath, Access, and Lotus Notes. Because Lotus Notes actually at the end of June this year has some, you have to move to the new HCL Lotus Notes version. Yeah, question.
Since Dataverse is kind of like the preferred method of consuming processing information.
Enterprise data platform.
Right. And is there any thought on taking out the premium requirement, premium license requirement for that, or maybe making it a little bit more consumable? It's like we're trying to push people that way, but the cost issue is preventing us from using it.
Yeah, so the question was more around the costs of Dataverse, and are we considering a lesser premium version? And we have that with Dataverse for Teams. In Dataverse for Teams, we found with that, we put that out in the pandemic whenever it was remote work and all those initiatives, and we found very limited usage of that, actually. So that was kind of our signal of there's not a real appetite for a lesser version of Dataverse. And how many of you think Dataverse is just a SQL Server database? It's not. It's like a huge data ecosystem on top of tons of Azure services. Like Dataverse is the largest platform user of Azure services, especially SQL Server. We're like their number one customer. But it includes cognitive services and tons of different other infrastructure on top of that. So it's quite expensive for us to run and maintain, right? So we don't charge you anything beyond your what we would call normal needs for your license. So it's not like it does require a premium license, and I would imagine it would continue to require the premium license. I would say if anything, it would be, you've seen us in the past, and I'm not alluding to anything here, by the way. If anything, it would be like cost optimization. Price, we went from $40 to $20 a few years ago. in the price. It might be just optimizing the price for you in that, from that standpoint. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I can say from the teams portion of it, I had explored that option, and I liked it. The biggest drawback from it was the interface, actually design and build apps, was incredibly cumbersome and a lot of times froze up on me.
Yep.
So that's why I just stopped using it.
I would say try it again. Actually, I think we added a lot more. So we had another journey we've been on is we've had multiple designers, and that was a new one we introduced. So we had like 5 designers out there, including the one in SharePoint when you customize a form from SharePoint list, or we call it a Microsoft list now, I think is what we call it. But we've converged them over time. So I would take a look at that. And also you'll see when I run the published app, you can publish it to Teams as well. So there's several different options that are there now for integration with Teams. You just don't get like API access, plug-in ability. There's those features you might want that aren't in there. But we have a number of customers running heavy workloads on Dataverse for Teams. But you have like a 1 gig limit on it, which is really, number of rows is typically what it goes to. But this app could actually be Dataverse for Teams, for example. It probably wouldn't be a large app. Okay, so back to my question. My question was, okay, we've got this application. The next question is now what, right? What do I do with this application? So what are some things that we need to do with it? Share it, yeah, so others can use it. But I would say from a governance perspective, I would hold off on the sharing until I do another step. You mentioned testing. Yeah, testing is one of those, but where would I test it? Obviously, I'd test it here myself, but I want to put it in another environment. How many have nightmares of default environments? Okay, let me show you something real quick on that. So let's talk about the default environment first. And wow, this demo is taking a lot longer than I expected. So let me make sure I kind of hammer some points home here on the governance side. So if I go to I'll just go to preview again. Notice what environment it sends me to, but let's hold off first. It takes me back there. Okay, so I'm gonna go to default. So this is the default environment. So you notice I'm on the default environment. And the way this works is we sort of save your last, like it's the MRU, most recently used environment. So it kind of takes you to that typically. So if I chose another environment and I go back and log back in, it goes back to that same environment, right? Watch what happens when I do this with default. So I'm in default, I'm gonna close this. I'm gonna go back to make.preview. Notice where it sent me. That's not default. Why not? I know we have a new feature out now. Environment routing, yeah, I like this guy. Like back there, great job, great job. Environment routing is a feature of managed environments. Essentially says, I actually have a good slide on it, I'll talk about it later, a little high level. But hey, let's get people out of building apps in the default environment, right? So we have this concept of different types of environments. You might have seen production and sandbox for those of you that can create environments. We also have developer environments. And that's part of the developer plan. So if you've ever, you have devs on your team, you can build with premium features using a developer plan, and it uses developer environments. And that's what I have here. You can have up to 3 per user, right? That signs up for a developer plan. But through environment routing, you can say, hey, send them to their own personal dev environment. Don't send them to default. And so they'll build by default in the personal dev environment. Does that make sense? I'll pull that out right now, actually. Yeah, question.
But if you set it up that way, that basically forces the developer environment to be a managed environment, which is a premium feature, so which requires that developer to have Power Apps premium and Power Automate premium if they're building both in that space.
I'll ask about that specifically on the target that we have here. I know we've looked at limiting requirement for dev environments to be managed, but a lot of our customers actually want them to be managed as well. So again, put your questions together, send them to me, and I'll try and get answers to that as well. So this question was, does that then force the dev environments to be managed, and then forces them to have both the Power Automate and Power Apps license? And so my answer was, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that it does not in this case. That's okay. And so if I have 3 dev environments. So if I went to the test environment, it would send me back to there because it's the most recently used. So as long as it's not the default, that's the point. Okay, so how do we configure that? Let's talk about some of the administrative features that we have. Well, before I do that, let's stick on the app, and then I'm going to get back into the admin features. So I want to move this to another environment. So this is make. So I'm going to go into my solutions, and when I just build an app, what solution does it go in? There's like this default solution, right? Well, we added a new feature called preferred solution. So you can create a solution and say, hey, any new thing that I create, what I don't create from a solution, put it in this version of a default. This is my default. So I created my own solution, and I said, this is the default solution. So anything I create, if I'm not in a solution, is going to go in this solution. Does that make sense? It used to be this common data services default, and everything got dumped in there, and you had, to tease it apart. Cool. So we've got that. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to deploy this solution using a new feature that we have called pipelines. And I've set it up once for this environment, and that's all I need to do, right? So I've got this pipelines icon here, and I can have multiple pipelines. I just have one, and it goes from dev to test to prod. And you as an administrator can configure that for these environments, right? And we have the ability to deploy under their credentials, but most of us don't want makers to have production import solution capabilities, right? So we can do that through a service principal as well. So you can manage that flow and configure it. Yeah, question.
When you deploy your service principal, is it still implementing it as their creator?
Yeah, so the question is, what does it do with the owner or the creator and for metadata if you're doing a service principal? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm sure they have it on the blog where they talk about it. There's quite a good documentation. You can send me the question too, and I know the PMs, they can give me that answer, or we can just test it out and see. All right, so all I do is just click deploy, and I'm not gonna go through this, right? But setting it up is pretty easy. If you have connections and environment variables, it's gonna ask you for that stuff, which is great, right? Because you go from a dev to a test in a new environment, you're gonna have different target environments for connections, right? So maybe you have SAP you're connecting to, and this one I do this value of connection info, and then test is this, and prod is another, right? So you're able to configure all that as you do your deployment. And so you just kind of walk through this wizard and move forward, right? Okay, so that is a managed environment feature. The target has to be a managed environment, not the dev environment. So again, back to his question, he's left, but I'm pretty sure we're erring on the fact that dev environments don't require being a managed environment. And this is something we've changed for pipelines. It's just the target needs to do it. One more thing on that is another thing that we've done. This is managed environment. So let me go here. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go into my test environment and show you a setting that I did. Test. There's a new feature now that allows you to turn off the support for publishing, importing solutions with unmanaged customizations. So unmanaged customizations come with a lot of overhead. Think of it like debug symbols for, if you have a .NET application, for example. It has a lot of metadata information, and whereas it's streamlined if it's a managed solution, we have upgrade paths and things like that for that. So if I tried to import a solution here, it would just balk at me. And I do have an unmanaged, and I'll show it's quick. So if I do import solution, browse, this is a import I did I exported an unmanaged version of that solution. It just comes back and says, hey, you can't do that, right? Okay, so the admin experiences, here we go. We've got a number of new features that are around managed environments. One of them is groups, one of them is advisor. And within groups is a feature called routing, which is what I just talked about. I log in to make .power apps, it sends me to a personal dev environment, not the default environment. So let's look at environment groups. Environment groups are like, I can create let's say an HR group, and add all the HR environments to there and set policies on those groups. So this has been a hugely appreciated feature that's been added. So if I go to mine, I created one, and it's got my 3 environments that are there, the dev, and it doesn't have to have the dev. It can be the test and the prod or the multiple prods or whatever. But I've got them all in here. They do have to be managed environments, right? And there's rules that you can set. And here's those rules. And there'll be more and more over time. We're just rolling this out. So for example, the welcome content that I mentioned earlier is right here, right? Solution checker, you can have some enforcement that says, hey, here's a list of rules. Let's show that one because that's a really good one. That's in, I think, in the solutions, but you can basically tweak what rules you want to enforce in there as they move from environment to environment. And we'll have more here. There's a pipeline, like default pipeline, that's coming out soon as well. It's just not in here quite yet, but that's coming around build time. And then there's the advisor, which in this case, there's only one advisory thing, which is, hey, you've got 3 license requests that are out there pending. Do you want to do something with them? So let me get back in the deck real quick and show you a few other things in the 9 minutes that we have. I do want to show that we have, these are end user features. This is our form fill feature. So if you're doing a Dataverse application, you're creating a new item, and this is included in Dynamics. It'll look at your data that you have and graph and sort of pre-fill out your form for you. And you can go and validate that that data is correct and accurate, right? So it's helping save repetitive time in form filling, sort of anticipating what that's going to be. And it's not like an IE or, it's not like an Edge or a Chrome remembered what I last typed in a field like this. This is more of looking at your data in the table and the data first data environment itself. We also have the conversation. So we have a control as well. You can drop a control in, or there's also a sidecar that you can pull at the top, like in the maker experience icon, where you can have a conversation with your data, like asking it questions around, hey, what's the top X, or who's the last person that did this, or something along those lines. That's in both model-driven apps and now in Canvas apps with Dataverse tables. So that is a premium feature. Okay, so look, high-level concept on what we're doing with advanced governance and advanced security is we want to bring you from your M365, we call basic license, to the enterprise world. And that's a lot of the attributes you see on the left, right? Personal productivity, when you see Power Automate, there you're creating a lot of automations, creating some basic apps, so it might be departmental productivity as well, and moving more to fully managed world of applications and automations, right? So with that, our world, we talk about managed environments, which encompass these features for these 3 objectives, right? So just a list of, you might want to take a picture of the slide, but like I said, I am going to share. These are a lot of the features that we have out or are recently put out as private preview. You'll see a lot of capabilities in here to help you have great visibility and control, well beyond when we initially launched like DLP, data loss prevention policies, right? We've gone well beyond that. And I mentioned a few this morning, customer managed keys, VNet support, right? Advisor's another one, right? So Advisor gives you the ability to see like, who are the top makers, right? Who are the top apps, what the apps that are most used, apps that are least used, apps that aren't used, apps that don't have an owner, all those kinds of things, hygiene-wise. You might have had some things with COE Toolkit and whatnot. We're proactively telling you about these. Not only that, but we're also giving you an easy way to take action on them, right? Post it in Teams, like, hey, do you still need this thing? You're the owner of the app, but it hasn't been used in a long time, something like that. Sharing limits is another one that we have in the control. And then I talked about pipeline with less efforts. So routing, again, is instead of taking you to the default environment, we're going to send you to your personal developer environment. And this goes into a lot of the background of why we do that. And there's a def environment routing, AK at the bottom. And then we talk about the groups and rules that I just showed you there. It's a pretty popular feature. Okay, so kind of the last area to cover is around security. We are taking security extremely seriously, investing a lot in this area right now. And we talk about a number of features here that we have out or are coming soon. I had to update a couple of these actually because they're already out, but we're trying to answer these questions that you have at the top here. But things like DLP at a more granular, deeper area, dataverse security, let's improve that. Let's simplify. Like, how many of you ever tried to set up permission sets, roles, access teams, all that? We're really working hard to try and simplify it because we made it so flexible that it adds friction, and you end up with people just saying, I'm just going to make you a system customizer or a system admin, right? Which is not great, right? The other thing that I'll tell you that we are doing is what we've learned is be secure by default. Be judicious from our perspective on taking a look at best practices and saying, this is the default, and it's least privilege, or it's something that's more secure and a better default for you. So we're being very specific of on by default for certain cases, right? As we work through new features. So you can get more on managed environments here. Again, this will be in the slides that I share. And so kind of recap since we're at the end. We talked about Power Platform. We talked about Copilot in general, the security side of it, compliance side, the safety of it. And then we went through this really long demo. I talked about both operating at enterprise scale with some governance features, as well as a lot of the Copilot capabilities we have in the maker experiences. I didn't get to show you one of the, I'll describe it. There's an end user feature that we just put out as well for a multi-line text box is you can draft with Copilot. So for example, what I was going to do is in the justification box is I was going to tell it to, hey, create a justification for why I should attend the M365 community conference. And it looks up the details on the internet about the conference. And they actually have some a justification document for this conference and Power Platform conference. And it generates that for me, right? So it helps you with your work. Well, look, I hope I see you all at the Power Platform conference coming up towards the end of the summer. And look, thank you. Thank you for being customers. And we really want your feedback. So please provide them through the ideas, through the community forums. Send me messages on who was our PMs, like Ken, who does governance, has podcasts, and he hosts office hours, and PowerCat team does the same. We want your feedback. We take it seriously. And so please provide that to us. And thank you for being customers.